Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Monday mock draft on the channel today. This is the post-divisional round mock draft. We now know where a lot of the teams are going to draft. Like I said before, though, we won't know the exact order until after the Super Bowl, but we see the Bills right here drafting, we see the Texans right here drafting, and then we see the teams playing in the conference championship game as the bottom four. Obviously, that will be decided in the coming weeks, but let's go ahead and get into the mock draft. I'm going to start off the mock draft right now. And the Bears, I really don't think that this is anything else but Caleb Williams, right? I really just don't think that they would be able to pass up Caleb Williams. I do think that Justin Fields is going to get traded. Now, the Bears this morning was announced did hire Shane Waldron to be their next offensive coordinator. I would imagine he got that with the promise that the Bears were going to draft Caleb Williams. That would be a very attractive opportunity if I was an offensive coordinator to get Caleb Williams to be my quarterback. So, no surprises here. Caleb Williams is the guy. Now, Washington, I'm still very much leaning Drake May, and that will be the pick here, but just hear me out for 1 second. There have been reports that, maybe Dan Quinn, maybe Raheem Morris. Let me see who their coach is before I can give you a concrete idea of who they're going to take. But as it currently stands, I think the overwhelming favorite would be Drake May, second best quarterback available. They probably have a huge hole at quarterback because I'm guessing whoever the new coach is probably not going to want to stick with Sam Howell, understandably so when you have the second overall pick. Now, at number 3, this is where I think it really gets interesting. Now, before, Gerard Mayo was hired, I probably would have said Joe Alt. You could have said, Marvin Harrison. There could have been a lot of guys you said, but he made an emphasis on the quarterback position. That makes me inclined to think that he will go with the third best quarterback available, which is Jayden Daniels. I think that, again, he mentioned it in his presser, kind of unprompted. They got to get the quarterback situation correct. And I think in this scenario, this is kind of perfect scenario for the Arizona Cardinals because they get the guy that they really wanted. They're not going to take a quarterback. So they get probably the number one player on their board, which is Marvin Harrison. I think that that's best case scenario for the Cardinals. Now, I think at pick 5 is where the draft really starts to get unpredictable. It really starts to get fun, I guess you could say. Now, Chargers don't have a head coach yet. Like a quarter of the teams in the league don't have a head coach. But I, in my gut, feel like Jim Harbaugh is going to be the next head coach. And if that's the case, Jim Harbaugh has a staple on his teams of being tough, physical, and good in the trenches. What would make them tough, physical, and good in the trenches? I think it's Joe Alt. Now, you look at Joe Alt, he can play, I think, left tackle or right tackle, but I think with Rashawn Slater over there at left tackle, he probably will bump to right tackle, and or Slater will bump to right. Either way, I think those guys can both be versatile. If you're Jim Harbaugh and you have the opportunity to get a blue chip offensive tackle prospect, I think you got to take it, especially because this helps protect your best asset, which is Justin Herbert. Now, the New York Giants, they need weapons. They need help in the trenches, and they need help with weapons. I would personally think, if I'm the New York Giants sitting here at number 6, I would go with Rome Odunze because you got to figure out quarterback. You have to figure out if Daniel Jones can be the answer long term. The best way to do that, and we saw it with A.J. Brown going to Philly, Stephon Diggs going to Buffalo, even DJ Moore this year going to Chicago, even though they don't still have an answer. Getting your quarterback an elite wide receiver is, I think, a really good litmus test to see how good he is. The Giants, if they're at 6, I think would take Rome Odunze. Now the Titans at number 7. Again, no fucking idea who their next head coach is going to be. I would make a more informed decision if I knew. But if I'm looking at it right here, they need wide receiver help, offensive line help, and DB help. I think that there's another blue chip offensive tackle prospect that I would find really hard to get out of the top 7. I'm going to go with Olu Fashanu out of Penn State. Again, they drafted Peter Skoronski last year, clearly trying to build up the trenches, clearly trying to, I think, adapt that Detroit model, which, now they're in the NFC Championship game, so it's obviously working. So I think that they're going to go with Olu Fashanu. I think that's a really good steal at number 7. For number 8 for the Atlanta Falcons, one thing they don't need is skill position talent, I don't think. Brock Bowers, while he would be a great player, not there with Kyle Pitts. Same thing with Malik Neighbors. Obviously, he's fantastic, but I don't think he's the pick there. I think the Falcons need to get better at defense, specifically in the corner room. I think A.J. Terrell is a stud, but I think you need more bodies there, especially if who I think is going to be the head coach ends up being the head coach in Atlanta, which is Bill Belichick. I think Cooper DeJean probably the highest drafted white cornerback ever. I mean, I don't have any, advanced analytics to say that, but I would have a pretty good hunch. Would improve their corner room, would make their defense more competent, even though it was pretty good last year, would add an extra element to it. And again, hopefully you get a really good coach to fix quarterback, because sitting at 8 is such a weird spot, because unless they trade up, I wouldn't take Penix or Bo Nix or McCarthy or, who's the other guy? I wouldn't take any of those guys at pick 8. If Jayden Daniels was still there at 8, I would definitely consider it. I probably actually would do it 100% if I was the Falcons, but I don't think that you can do that. I don't think that you can do that if you're the Falcons at 8, with those other guys. So probably not. The Bears, I think a really, really good option for the Bears would be Brock Bowers. And I know they have Cole Kmet, so this makes it a little more difficult. And in this scenario, with Malik Neighbors still on the board, he would definitely be the pick here, because, like I said, they need wide receiver help. They already have Cole Kmet, who is I would say above average tight end. I don't think he's anything spectacular, but he's above average for sure. I would think that Malik Neighbors would then be a Chicago Bear, and you would have 2 really good playmakers at wide receiver for the Bears, with then hopefully Caleb Williams as well. Number 10, the Jets, I guarantee you, are going with an offensive lineman, whoever the best available. In this scenario, it is Talise Fuaga from Oregon State. I think their number one priority this offseason has to be protect Aaron Rodgers so that he can play a full season and not 4 snaps like he did last year. Next, Minnesota Vikings. They do need quarterback. And again, this is where I think the Michael Penix watch starts at pick 11. If he balls out in the Senior Bowl, if they really like him in the pre-draft, combine and the medicals all check out, I think the Vikings would consider Michael Penix here at 11. Again, to me, it's a little rich, so I think that you can maybe circle back in the second round and pick up another guy in the draft. But right here, they need a lot of positions, right? This is also dependent, truthfully, on if they re-sign Kirk Cousins. So I'm going to pretend in my fantasy land that the Vikings, come draft time, have already re-signed Kirk Cousins, so they're good at quarterback. Right now, I think they need interior offensive line, and I think that they would need some help on the defensive line as well. Me personally, I would go with Jerzon Newton. You need, I think, an interior guy who is going to disrupt offenses. We've seen the way a dominating defensive tackle can just ruin an offense. And truthfully, I think now with the Lions being able to run the football very, very well, the Bears now having Caleb Williams in this scenario, the Packers having Jordan Love, who's been a stud, you need a game wrecker on defense. You need a guy who's just going to fuck shit up. And I think that's what Jerzon Newton can do. I think that would be a good pick for the Vikings. Number 12, the Denver Broncos. Truthfully, this is not so much a pick of need. This is a pick of, holy shit, I can't believe Brock Bowers fell to pick 12. I'm Sean Payton. I'm going to use him to his absolute fullest. I think Brock Bowers would be a fantastic get for the Broncos. He'd be a fantastic get for anybody, but especially a creative, intuitive mind like Sean Payton, I think could really get the most out of them. I mean, he got the most out of Taysom Hill, right? He was throwing passes, running, he was punting, whatever the fuck he was doing. Take what he did with Taysom Hill and just imagine that with Brock Bowers. I think Sean Payton would be licking his chops if Brock Bowers fell this far, and I think he'd be the pick at 12. Now, the Raiders. Now, this is not my first time mocking him to the Raiders, but I think it fits for a multitude of reasons. Nate Wiggins. Now, the reason I like Nate Wiggins to the Raiders, obviously, I think they need more help with the defensive backfield. But the Raiders historically like guys who are freaks in some capacity. They like the really fast guys, really big guys, whatever. Nate Wiggins has really long arms, and I think that's a trend. I would say it started by Pete Carroll back in the Legion of Boom days, where cornerbacks with long arms, I think, are so valuable. Like, look at Tariq Woolen. Tariq Woolen has freakishly long arms. He's fast and has long arms. I would argue, and I have to do a little bit more research, but I would argue that Nate Wiggins probably comps very similarly, physicality-wise, to Tariq Woolen. Because Tariq Woolen, I believe, is 6'4", so he's 6'2". He's a couple inches shorter, but again, really long arms, fast guy. He is going to be a guy that if he tests really well at the combine, we could see some buzz for top 10. I promise you. I promise you that. For the New Orleans Saints, I think they need to go BPA, best player available. I think Dallas Turner is that guy. He's a good edge rusher from Alabama. Now, there are people that are saying that he is more talented than Will Anderson was last year. Not as refined, clearly, but people are arguing that he's more talented, which I can understand the argument for. But I just think when you're the Saints and you're kind of just in the middle. You're mid in every sense of the word. You kind of just got to go for BPA right here. All right, so Indianapolis. I think that receiver would be a good option here. I know Michael Pittman's a free agent. I would assume that he re-signs, but even if he does, I think that you're left with one really good receiver on the roster. I don't think Alec Pierce is it, unfortunately. You don't have a tight end. I know there's the Austin Hooper versus Mo Alley Cox debate. I don't really care. They both suck ass. If Brock Bowers fell to 15, I mean, that would just be a miracle for the Indianapolis Colts, but he probably won't. And so I think you got to look at receivers. Now, just looking at the board, there's a lot of good defensive linemen, a lot of tackles, edge rushers, corners. Brian Thompson, I think it's a bit rich to take him at 15. I probably wouldn't do that. So then I think you go, oh shit, let's get better on the defensive line. Let's do something like that. Jared Verse at pick 15, I think is going to be really good. Again, you want to make that defense better. I think their defense was not bad by any means last year. I think Gus Bradley coached a pretty good unit, but they weren't elite by any stretch of the imagination, let's just say. So I think that would be the argument for Jared Verse there. Now, Seattle sitting at 16. This is, again, where I think you kind of raise your eyebrows and say, are they taking Michael Penix, Washington kid, or played in Washington at school? They probably need a quarterback. Now, here's the thing. I believe it's 5 days after the Super Bowl is when Geno Smith's contract either needs to be re-upped or they can cut him without penalty. So there's a big decision looming about Geno Smith. That will kind of inform my decision on what the Seahawks do right here. Now, as it currently stands, I would imagine Geno Smith comes back. I don't think they have a fallback option that's better than Geno Smith going into next year as it currently stands. But it is what it is. Seahawks at 16, I think they need to go with the defensive lineman. Their defensive line got just scraped up last year, unfortunately. Latu from UCLA, I think, is going to be a really good option. Again, West Coast guy coming into Seattle. Going to play that edge rusher position alongside Boye Mafe, who made major strides last year. But I think Boye Mafe he's definitely not in the like Nick Bosa, Myles Garrett, TJ Watt tier of edge rusher, but I think he could be really good. And the problem is that he isn't good enough to take on those double teams, to be the focal point of the offensive line's game plan, right? Now, if you have two guys who are talented, you can commit less resources to Boye Mafe, which would allow him to feast and would allow Latu to feast as well. Jacksonville Jaguars, they need help on the interior offensive line. I would argue they also need help with DBs. I like Kool-Aid McKinstry here for the Jaguars. I think he's a playmaking cornerback. Now, there's going to be a debate who's better, him or Terrion Arnold. As an Alabama fan, I'm telling you, my eye test tells me Kool-Aid McKinstry. I guess it's yet to be seen, but we'll see. We're going to get another Alabama player here, right here for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to go with J.C. Latham to protect Joe Burrow. Again, their priority every offseason until it works is going to be protect Joe Burrow. Get him an elite offensive line. Keep him up on his feet. I understand his injury this year was not so much necessarily like piss-poor offensive line play, but for a guy that's dealt with so many injuries as Joe Burrow has, I think it's important that he is kept upright. For the Rams, now, this is an interesting spot because they probably, not in the micro, but in the macro, probably need quarterback. But I would imagine a team that, went to the playoffs, lost by a point on the road, is probably looking to continue to make this roster better now, not so much worry about the future just yet, I would imagine, especially because Matthew Stafford ended the year relatively healthy. So, quarterback aside for a second, I think if you're going to go with an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, I would say that you're probably going to go with Amaris Mims, the tackle from Georgia. Again, kind of the same logic I just said with Joe Burrow. Keep Matthew Stafford upright for the love of God. You can't let him. He's not able to take those hits like he once was. Steelers, center, linebacker, and DB. Again, I think a good player on the board here who is falling a little bit. Terrion Arnold, you can make the argument that he's better than Kool-Aid McKinstry. I personally won't, but I think that there's an argument to be made. He'll pair nicely with Joey Porter Jr. 21, Miami Dolphins. I'm going to go with an offensive lineman here 100%. Now, going down the board, Penix would be very intriguing if the Dolphins did that, but I think, if you're going to roast Tua for a lot of things, Penix is not a great athlete either, but, he has a fucking hose for an arm, so you could justify it. I am actually going to go with Jordan Morgan here, the tackle from Arizona. Maybe a bit high, but I do think they need offensive line, especially with Armstead dealing with injuries a lot. I feel like Jordan Morgan is versatile. You can kind of plug him into different spots, so I would be interested to see what the Dolphins do at 21. Philadelphia Eagles. I truthfully think that they need wide receivers. Now, a few weeks ago, I was like, why do the Eagles need wide receivers? Watching that playoff game, when A.J. Brown is not available, Devontae Smith is a damn good receiver, don't get me wrong, but they have, like, no other options outside of Smitty. And it would not hurt to have a field stretcher. It would not hurt to have a third threat. I think that's what Quez Watkins was supposed to be. He wasn't, obviously, but I think Brian Thomas Jr. Out of LSU, I think would just help complement this Philly offense even more. Now, the Houston Texans, I would argue that they could also go wide receiver. I think Troy Franklin would be a really good get in this Cleveland offense. But I think that they have a little bit bigger positions. I think Chris Braswell out of Alabama. Again, D'Amico Ryans is a defensive guy, but he's also an Alabama guy. Drafted Will Anderson last year. I'm sure he's going to talk to Will about that. But Chris Braswell, I think, is going to help improve this young Houston defense. Just give them another playmaker. Give them another Alabama guy. You know, they have 3 already, so good for them, right? 24 Dallas Cowboys. I would argue that we're looking at corners here because corners, Deron Bland, maybe not because I guess Trayvon Diggs is coming back. That's totally fair. Defensive line is also a big one. But again, if you're looking down the line, there's not a lot of defensive linemen. I will take Braylon Trice, though, the edge from Washington, just to have a guy to pair alongside Micah Parsons. You know, DeMarcus Lawrence, we don't know how many years left he has of being a really, really good edge rusher. So I think Braylon Trice to wait in the wings is completely fine. And hopefully Mozzie Smith obviously is good like he wasn't last year. Green Bay Packers, you had a great year. I mean, you are the youngest team, and you had San Francisco on the fucking ropes in San Francisco. Good for you guys. I would love for the Packers, Carmen Kitchens out of Miami. Make that safety position even better. You know, I think Darnell Savage is not that good. I know he had the pick 6 against Dallas, but he got fucking torched by Kittle on that touchdown, and he dropped a pick. Carmen Kitchens, I think, would be a really good get for the Packers, and I think it would help improve their young secondary. Who knows if Joe Barry's there, but shit, who knows? Yeah, who knows? Tampa, same story. You guys went a lot farther than I would have thought. You put up a pretty good fight against Detroit. It wasn't as close as Green Bay, but you put up a good fight. I will not take a quarterback here, but I will go with Troy Franklin. And the reason for that is because I think that you need, another field stretching wide receiver. I think he's a playmaker. But additionally, I think Mike Evans is going to leave in free agency, and that is a massive, massive hole that you're going to have to fill. Now, obviously, we'll know more closer to the draft. I'm projecting, as I normally do in my life, I'm projecting, months in advance. But I do think Mike Evans will leave in free agency, unfortunately. So there's that. 27, Arizona Cardinals. Now, they could use wide receiver as well. They could also use an offensive lineman, defensive lineman. Is it crazy to give them Ladd McConkey here? Is that the craziest thing in the world? I don't know. He's getting a lot of first-round hype. He's getting first-round buzz. And if you're Arizona, all of a sudden you have juiced up your wide receiver room with 2 very different wide receivers in Marvin Harrison and Ladd McConkey in this draft. And I think your offense is looking really good now with Kyler Murray. Buffalo Bills. Man, I'm sorry about that, Bills. You guys, damn, that's just, I genuinely feel bad. But it's okay. You guys will be all right. I think you guys could go with more defensive backs. I think that your defensive backs were really thin. Linebackers were too, but I wouldn't take any linebackers in the first round here. Enos Rakashaw Jr., take the best corner available. Hopefully have him with Rasul Douglas next year because your defense is kind of falling apart a little bit. And your offense is not exactly too far behind, but your defense is falling apart. So we need to supplement that and get some more skill guys in there. Kansas City Chiefs. I imagine we go with a wide receiver here. I would be pretty shocked if they didn't. Although it's a bit early, I would say Devontae Walker is a good pick here. Again, they just need receivers. Rashee Rice is good, but he's not like wide receiver 1 certifiable good. MVS sucks. Kadarius Toney sucks. Who else? They have other guys that suck. Travis Kelce's getting older, but it's just, they just need weapons. Detroit Lions, right here. They need defensive backs badly. They were getting cooked against the Rams, and they kind of got cooked against the Buccaneers as well. Kamari Lassiter, I think, would make this team a lot better. Give them a dependable cornerback, because why is Kendall Vildor getting meaningful snaps in the playoffs? Why is he getting meaningful snaps in the playoffs? I don't understand. San Francisco 49ers. I would argue they also need corners, but I think, offensive line wouldn't hurt them either. You could draft the eventual successor to Trent Williams, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to draft Troy Fautanu out of Washington to get them a successor for Trent Williams. He can probably play left tackle because I know McKivitz sucks. They can put him at right tackle and have Trent at left for a while, but then swap him to left when Trent retires or leaves, whatever he does. Baltimore Ravens. It says they need defensive line and corners. Now, I am going to give them defensive line. I'm going to go with Leonard Taylor Jr. just to increase that pass rush, who doesn't have a lot of big names, but they have been producing at a big-time level. So, get out of my face. So, this is the mock draft. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.